Okay? All right, so let's just recall our machlokas from yesterday. The Gemara seems to have maintained, at least according to one opinion, which seems to be the prevalent opinion, that there's the machlokas between Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon, and Rebbe is regarding the water in the kior and the Kohen's washed hands. In both cases, Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon holds that water does not become pasul belina, and the washed hands do not become pasul belina, which means that if the water is left out all night, even going into the morning, it's no problem. And similarly, if a Kohen washes his hands at night, that can continue into the day. He doesn't have to rewash his hands the next day. Rebbe disagrees on both fronts, and Rebbe holds that if a Kohen washed his hands yesterday and he worked through the night, he still has to wash his hands in the new morning. And similarly, water that was left out overnight in the kior and was not re-immersed into the aqueduct, so that water that's left out into the morning is going to be pasul, is going to be contaminated. It cannot be used anymore for hand washing. And you'd have to, I guess, discard that water. So remember the muchni, this concept of the pulley hoist. That would be, you would lower the kior into the aqueduct in order to avoid the problem of lina, of getting the water contaminated. So that seems to be only according to Rebbe that this was necessary. But in any event, the Gemara had deliberated over whether Reb Shimon ben Elazar holds that way or not, but it seems like Reb Shimon ben Elazar does not hold that way. Reb Shimon ben Elazar does not require the water to be lowered into the aqueduct because he holds that the water does not become pasul belina. Now we have the next question, Iboyalahu. And you'll see why all of this background information is necessary for today's daf. But first the question is raised, Mahu lekadesh yadav v'raglav b'kior, mimenu amar rachmana v'lo b'socho, o dilma afilu b'socho. So the first question is, if a Kohen wishes to purify his hands with the kior, but instead of letting the water run out of the spout of the kior, he wants to place his hands into the top of the kior, which has an opening, and place his hands into the water instead of letting the water run onto his hands. Will that work or not? On the one hand, you could say the Torah says the word mimenu, from it, which implies the water has to run out of it before sanctifying his hands. But on the other hand, maybe that's not the correct way to read it, so we're not sure. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Tashma. So come and listen. We saw a brisa yesterday, O shetaval b'mei ma'ora v'avad avodaso pisula. If a Kohen, instead of washing his hands from the kior, instead immerses his hands in a mikveh, so the halacha is that his hands have not been sanctified and any avoda that he does is pasul, is invalid. So ha meki or dumya d'mei ma'ora v'avad avodaso k'sheira. Let's infer from that if instead of sticking his hands in a mikveh, he sticks his hands in the kior, then it wouldn't be pasul, it would be kosher. Isn't that an appropriate inference to make? It's only because you stuck it in a mikveh, but if you stuck it in a kior, it would be okay. So the Gemara says, lo, that's not the correct inference. Because mei ma'aretz tzricha le'shelo tomar kol gufo toivel behenyodav raglav l'kol shekei. Perhaps it could be that even when you immerse your hands in a kior, it's also not kosher. But the chiddush of this brisa is to tell you that don't think that a mikveh is acceptable for purification of the hands. You could have made a kal v'chomer. If you can use a mikveh to immerse your whole body and purify it, then surely you can use it to immerse just your hands. And so therefore, to deflect that thinking, that's why the brisa says that if you immerse it in a mikveh, it's no good. But you can't infer from there that immersing them in a kior is going to be good, because that was not the topic of the brisa. Next. Now let's go back to our whole issue of the muchni. We'll see in a minute. Amar Rebbe Chia bar Yosef, me kior nifsalin lamatirin kimatirin la'ivarim ke'ivarim. This is going to be a sequence of 3 early Amoraim. We're going to make 3 statements. The first 2 will be understandable at face value. The third one from Rabbi Yochanan is going to be difficult when you're going to need to decipher it. But at face value, what Rabbi Chia bar Yosef says is not anything like we've seen before in the machlokas between Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon, and Rebbe. It's almost like a middle position, or it's a more machmir position even than Rebbe. What does he say? He says that if you want to wash your hands from the water of the kior, in order to do a service that's what's called a matir, which means it can only be done, it's the final part of the sacrificial process that completes the korban and permits the meat of the korban to be eaten. So for example, sprinkling of the blood for an animal sacrifice, kemitza and placing the komets on the mizbeach for a mincha. Those are acts that are called matirin. Now, they can only be done during the day. And that's the key issue. So according to Reb Chia, if you want to do the avoda of a matir, of something that can only be done during the day, then the water from the kior has to only have been exposed or left out during the day. But if it's left out at night, it can no longer be used to wash the hands for a Kohen who wants to do the avoda of a matir that can only be done during the day. Basically, the bottom line is you can only use day water for the day shift. You can use night water for the night shift, which is the avorim, which means that if, let's say, a Kohen just wants to work using the night shift, what can you do during the night? You take the remaining animal parts, the entrails and the limbs, and you stoke them on the mizbeach. He's coming to work at night, so he can use water that was left out at night in the kior and wash his hands with that. But what cannot be done is a Kohen who wishes to do the vital avoda during the day to wash his hands with water that was left out at night. And therefore, explains Rashi, the standard procedure would be is that if you want to do the avoda during the day with the kior water, you would have to take the kior and submerge it into the aqueduct right before sunset, so that the water that is in there could be used the next day for the next day's service. If you left it out at night, then, and you washed your hands, let's say, and you wanted to continue into the next day assuming that would be okay, you would not be able to do that. You would not be able to do that, even if you hold like Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, apparently is what he's saying. It's not clear.
It's all daytime water for the next day because before sunset?
No, even if you left the water out at night, you could not wash your hands with that water in order to do the service of a daytime service. Not because it's old, but because it's been left out at night.
It gets tainted by the night.
It becomes tainted by the night, but only insofar as doing daytime avoda. In order to do nighttime avoda, you could wash your hands with that water. So that's Reb Chia Bar Yosef Shita. Reb Chisda Omar, Af lematirin ein nifsalin ela ba'amud hashachar ke'evarin. And Reb Chisda disagrees, and he says no. It's not clear whether we're only going in according to Rebbe Shita or we're going to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. It seems like, just to correct myself, it seems like this whole sugya is going according to Rebbe, who's more machmir, that the water becomes pasal belina. But Rebbe Chia Bar Yosef is adding to that is that according to Rebbe, the water only becomes pasal belina if it is allowed to stay out from night transitioning into day, into morning. But he's adding that even if the water is set out at night and you resubmerge it before the morning arrives, the water that is left out at night cannot be used for daytime avoda. It cannot be used for daytime avoda. So even if you were to submerge it, you'd have to empty out the kior in order to use it for the next day's avoda. That's the point. So the second statement is Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda disagrees with Reb Chia Bar Abba, and he's more Rav Yosef rather, and he's more lenient. He says, no, at face value, it doesn't matter whether the water is left out during the day. It doesn't matter whether the water is left out at night. You can wash your hands with that water for either daytime or nighttime avoda, and the only requirement is that you don't allow the water to be left out as night transitions into morning. That's when it becomes pasal belina. As long as the kior is submerged during that transition point between night and day, then the water is fine for any kind of avoda. The Rabbi Yochanan Omar, so that's the first two statements. Now let's get to the cryptic statement. For Rabbi Yochanan Omar, kior kiven sheshakao shuv ein ma'alehu. Rabbi Yochanan says that once you submerge the kior at the end of the day, you cannot pull it out again. You cannot pull it out again. Ostensibly, what he means is that you can't take it out at night at all. Basically, his seems to be the most machmir, and he seems to say like this: you must submerge the kior before shkia, and you can't take it out again until the next day. You've got to leave it there until the next day.
After Alos HaShachar.
After Alos HaShachar. So the Gemara now says, Lememra de la avodas laila nami lo chazi? You mean to tell me that according to Rabbi Yochanan, you can't even use water that's left out at night to do the nighttime avoda? He seems to be the most machmir. Wait a minute. V'ha amar Rabbi Asi, amar Rabbi Yochanan mishmei de'ilfa, kior shalosh sheka'o mi ba'erev, mekadesh mimenu la'avodas laila, ulamachar eno mekadesh. But what about this statement of Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Ilfa? That if a kior was not submerged before night fell, you're allowed to use that water for the night service, and in the following day, you cannot use that water. You cannot use that water to sanctify. So it sounds like Rabbi Yochanan is saying, in the name of Ilfa, that the water that's left out at night can be used for nighttime avoda. It just can't be used for daytime avoda. So my eino ma'alehu nami tekomar la'avodas yom, avo la'avodas layla chazin. So the Gemara says, you're right, we misinterpreted Rabbi Yochanan. Really what Rabbi Yochanan means is that if you want to use the water in the kior for the daytime shift, you cannot. You have to leave it submerged. But if you want to use the water of the kior for the nighttime shift, no problem. Just pull it out of the aqueduct, wash your hands, even at nighttime, and it's perfectly fine. That's what Rabbi Yochanan holds. But the Gemara then says, well, ihachi, hainu de Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. Then how is he any different from Rabbi Chia bar Yosef? That's exactly what Rabbi Chia bar Yosef holds. That the water that's left out at night can only be used for the night shift. It cannot be used for the day shift. That's exactly what you're saying Rabbi Yochanan is saying. So the Gemara says, Ika beinaihu gezerah shikua. The difference is between the two of them, is there a requirement to submerge the kior? So comes along Rashi, and he tells us that the Gemara is really shifting dramatically at this point. And it's really not implicit in the words, but Rashi reads in a whole bunch at this stage of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, in reality, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he does not hold like Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. Rabbi Yochanan in reality holds that the water that is left out in the kior, whether in the day or at night, could be used really for day service or night service. And the only thing that Rabbi Yochanan requires is that we require you midirabanan, that before shkia, you need to submerge the water back into the aqueduct. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan's shita is that the water is perfectly kosher. Water is perfectly kosher for any kind of avoda. But our concern is that if we let you leave the water out at night, someone's going to forget to resubmerge it when dawn is about to strike. And because of that, we're worried that the water will become puzzle, someone will forget about it, and a Kohen will wash his hands with it and contaminate the entire avoda. So Rabbi Yochanan says, in reality, the water is fine, like Rav Chisda says. But I require that before night falls, the night at the end of the day, before sunset, submerge the kior. Submerge the kior, so that we don't have a problem of someone forgetting that the water was left out. Who left the kior out? Right? Who? Right? And someone left the kior out, and no one will remember, and then water will be contaminated. So that's Rabbi Yochanan shita.
Isn't there an inconsistency there? If he doesn't need it to be in for practical purposes, why is he requiring it to be submerged?
The answer is because everyone agrees at this point in the Gemara, all three Amoraim agree that if the water is left out at that transition point between night and dawn, then the water is contaminated. Everyone agrees to that. The only issue is the water usable if it's left out at night before dawn. That's the issue. So Rabbi Yochanan's concern is if we let you leave the water out at night, the water doesn't become puzzle just by being present in the nighttime. Mm-hmm. But we're worried that someone's going to forget about it, and when dawn comes, it will not have been submerged before dawn.
But if it has to be submerged before dawn, then you're never using the water from the night.
That's right. No.
In the day.
No.
Never use it.
Incorrect.
In the day. Never using it in the day.
But that's not the point. The point is that Rabbi Yochanan is concerned. Yes, you will, by the way. You will be using the water during the day. If I take the water of the kior,
right,
I submerge it in the aqueduct, the same water that was there is going to be there when I pull it out. It's the same water. It's just connected to a larger body of water, but it's the same water. If that water was contaminated, so then I can't use it even if it was submerged in the kior. That's the point. Reb Chia Bar Yosef is the machmir position. He says you can't leave the water out at night, even if you submerge it before dawn, because when you pull it out after dawn, you won't be able to use that water for avoda.
It's the same water.
Right, it's the same water. You have to discard the water from the nighttime before you can, and you'll have to replace it with fresh water. So Reb Chisda says the water, it doesn't matter, as long as it's not left out in the transition period between night to day, then it's okay. Just to make sure it's submerged before dawn. Rabbi Yochanan seems to, at this point, agree with Rav Chisda that the water is perfectly kosher, but there's a takana, make sure before sunset, stick the kior, submerge the kior to make sure that doesn't get left out in that transition point between night and day. So the Gemara now says, well, wait a minute, that doesn't fit into another statement of Rabbi Yochanan. V'ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan kidesh yadav litrumas hadeshen lemachar ein tzarach lekadesh shekvar kidesh mitchilas avoda. We saw yesterday that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the guy who's doing trumas hadeshen, when do you do trumas hadeshen? You don't do it in the morning. You do it in the pre-dawn, pre-morning, when it's totally pitch dark.
Immediately you come inside.
No, you do it. It's maybe, let's say, 45 minutes before dawn arrives, is when you do Trumas Hadeshen. When the rooster crows, that's when you do the Trumas Hadeshen. So Rabbi Yochanan says you can wash your hands from the water of the kior. So the water is obviously being pulled out from its submerged state, and ein sarach lekadesh, and then that Kohen who washed his hands to do Trumas Hadeshen does not have to rewash his hands, because he already washed his hands at the beginning. Now, what is the question from here? According to Rashi, the question is like this. It's not such a problem that we're going to tell you to pull out the kior in the middle of the night, right? That's not what we're worried about, because Rabbi Yochanan can accept that. He's only worried about not submerging it before sunset. He says if you don't submerge it before sunset, it's going to be like all of the other Kohanim, everyone's going to think, all right, some other Kohen's going to submerge it. I don't have to submerge it. Or like, when you go to Shalosh Shudas and everyone's washing, so what do? You don't turn off the sink because you figure, let me let the water fill up for somebody else. So every Kohen who comes along, let's say at 11 o'clock at night, will wash his hands in the kior and say, I don't need to submerge this because another Kohen will come along at midnight, let's say, and he'll want to wash his hands. So why should I burden him by having to submerge it and he'll have to pull up the hoist and everything? I'll leave it out. And the fear is you'll leave it out and it'll stay out all night, even into the dawn.
And no one will submerge it.
But over here, in the case of the Trumas Hadeshen, this Kohen knows that it's going to be day in 45 minutes. So we're not worried to tell him not to pull out the kior. Pull out the kior. You'll wash your hands, and then you'll immediately submerge it again. We're not worried about that. But the question that we have is, why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say explicitly that after the Kohen doing the Trumas Hadeshen washes his hands, he should immediately submerge the kior? He doesn't say that. That's our question. So the Gemara says now, Bishlam l'Rava, Demokim lehahi karabalasa b'Reb Shimon hakarebi, Abaya demukim lakarebi kasha derebi adarebi. He says, now we saw a machlokas yesterday between Rava and Abaya, who, when Rabbi Yochanan says that the Kohen doing the Trumas Hadeshen can wash his hands in the pre-dawn and then not worry about washing his hands the second time, is that going only like Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon, who says there's no problem of lina with the water? Or does it go even according to Rebbe? So according to Rav, it goes only according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar. But according to Rebbe, if you wash your hands in the pre-dawn, you have to wash it again after dawn. So then I could answer the question. Reb Yochanan, who says that you have to make sure that the kiyur is always submerged, is holding like Rebbe. The Reb Yochanan over here, who says, let the Kohen wash his hands and we don't care if he submerges it or not, that goes according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So that would explain that. But according to Abaya that we saw yesterday, who says that this law, that a Kohen can wash his hands for Trumas Hadeshin in the pre-dawn and not wash it again after dawn, goes even according to Rebbe. Rebbe agrees to that since it's almost morning anyway. And if Rebbe agrees to that, so then why is it that over here, Reb Yochanan is not concerned about you resubmerging the kiyur, whereas our previous Reb Yochanan statement is that you always have to make sure that it's submerged at night, lest you come to violate the law and allow it to be outside when night transitions to day. So the Gemara says, "Ma'ishna hasan de mishakele, ma'ishna hacha de lo mishakele." That's part of the question. Why is it that in one place Rabbi Yochanan requires you to always keep it submerged at night, and why over here does he not require the Kohen who washed his hands for Trumas Hadeshin not to immediately resubmerge it? So the Gemara answers, "De misalek levahadr mishakele." So the Gemara says, you're right. That's what you have to say that Rabbi Yochanan means over here. He means to say that the Kohen is going to wash his hands for Trumas Hadeshin, even though he doesn't state so explicitly, it's implicit, that he's going to have to resubmerge the kiyur before dawn arrives in order to make sure that the water does not become pasul. So, ihachi lemochar eno makadesh amai. So the Gemara says, let's go back to the previous statement of Rabbi Yochanan, who was quoting in the name of Ilfa. What did Rabbi Yochanan say? He said that if you leave the water out at night, you can use it to wash your hands for the nighttime avoda, but you cannot use it for the daytime avoda. Now, according to what we just said, Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with that. Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rav Chisda, and he holds that as long as the kiyur is submerged in water, in that transition point, you could use the water that was left out at night. So it's not accurate what we're saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says, no, ein tzarech lekadesh. What he means to say is that you don't have to wash your hands a second time. If you washed your hands, let's say, for Trumas Hadeshin, which is in the pre-dawn hours, so then since you washed it right before the morning arrives, that's what Rabbi Yochanan means to say, that the water that was taken out at night for Trumas Hadeshin, you can wash your hands with it to do Trumas Hadeshin, and you don't need to rewash your hands once the dawn arrives, because the washing for Trumas Hadeshin covers you for the entire day. Okay, so now we've got Rabbi Yochanan Shita, is essentially holding the same way as Rav Chisda. Water that's left out at night is perfectly kosher as long as it's not left out at that transition point from night to day. Right? The only thing that Rabbi Yochanan requires is that lechatchila you should always keep the kiyur submerged at night, lest it be left out at that transition point. Lememra de lamatirin mechsa chazi, hainu de Rav Chisda. So the Gemara says, well, if according to what we're saying now, if according to Rabbi Yochanan, you can use night water even to do the day shift, so then how is he any different from Rav Chisda? So the answer is, Ika beinayu mitzvah shikua. As we've surmised, the only difference between Rav Chisda and Rabbi Yochanan is there a lechatchila requirement midirabanan to keep the kiyur constantly submerged at nighttime. Rav Chisda says, I'm not worried about it. You can let the water stay out. Let the kohanim who want to come in for the night shift wash their hands freely. And we'll rest assured that before daybreak, someone will resubmerge the kiyur. But Rav Yochanan says, no, I don't like that. I want to make sure that before sunset of the end of the day, you submerge the kiyur and keep it submerged the entire night, except for the guy who's going to do the Trumas Hadesh.
So you have to pull it out, use it, and then resubmerge it.
That's right. Now, meisvei. So now I'm going to raise another contradiction. We're raising a contradiction against Rav Chisda. Now, Rabbi Yochanan makes perfectly good sense, because according to Rabbi Yochanan, you had to keep the kiyur submerged the entire night. But according to Rav Chisda, you're allowed to leave the water out at night in the kiyur. So let's challenge Rav Chisda. It says in the Brisa, Lo hayuroan oso v'lo shomen es kolo, ad sheshomen kol shel eitz she'asa ben katin muchni l'kiyur, v'hein omrim higia eis kiddush yadayim v'raglayim min hakiyur. So the Brisa says like this. It says that in the pre-dawn hour of when the Kohen is going to do the Trumas Hadeshen, he did not walk in with a lantern or a flashlight. It was totally pitch black, and they would not be able to see him about to do the scooping of the ash on the top of the Mizbech. All they could see were just the glowing embers on the top of the altar, but they didn't see the Kohen coming. How would they know that the Kohen had arrived? They would hear the click, click, click of the hoist system, which had a wooden, what do you call, like a gear, a wooden gear, going click, 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 click to hoist up the kior. And that's how they would know, the Kohen has come to sanctify his hands, to wash his hands for the Trumas Hadeshen. That's how they would hear it.
A miracle, no?
No, it wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a miracle. It just made a loud noise.
Detective. There's a squeaky wheel.
If you've ever been in Jerusalem at 5 or 4 in the morning, and you hear from the Islamic the muazzin, the Islamic prayer tower, Allahu Akbar, right? You know, that's you don't need a loudspeaker for that. In the pre-dawn hours, you can hear a pin drop. The noise travels far, very, very far. Yeah. There's a Gemara that says, and Rashi quotes this Gemara, that the click, click, click of the pulley system was so loud that it would travel all the way to Yericho, and people could hear it all the way in Jericho. Okay, so what?
No alarm clocks.
Well, you'll see. There is another alarm clock, as we'll see in just a second.
Who's the they that could hear this?
People, anyone could hear it.
I mean, who is in the temple at this point? Up.
There are Kohanim. There are Kohanim.
Other Kohanim saying that this guy's.
Yeah. Now, my lav de misale clay. So don't you see that this Rabbi Yochanan is being validated by this brisa that the kior is submerged all night. So alma mishakeale. So you see that he had to submerge it. So the Gemara says lo de mishakeale. No, the answer is that they would hear the Kohen washing his hands, submerging it after. In other words, the water could have been left out all night in the kior. The kior was above ground, and after he washed his hands, they would hear the click, click, click of him lowering it afterwards, submerging it into the aqueduct.
So it'd be submerged for the transition.
For the transition. Yeah. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute, Ida mishakeale mi mishtame kala, mishtame akala. The Gemara says, when you are lowering something using a hoist with a gear, all you need to do is disengage the gear and then let gravity lower it in. There's no reason for a click, click, click sound. Just disengage the gear and let gravity do its work. So why is there a click, click, click? So the Gemara answers, Mishakeale begilgila. The answer is that there was a deliberate desire to use the click, 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 even when submerging it, to enable people to hear the sound. That could be the explanation. Lishna achrina de Mishakeale b'chumrase ki hecha de lishtame kale. V'lishma inon v'leise. So the Gemara says another version of that is, it's the same answer but just a slightly different language, is that they would use the special gear that would make a click, click, click sound, and they would deliberately make the sound so that it would act as an alarm clock to let people know that the Kohen was doing or completing the Trumas Hadeshen and dawn was soon going to arrive. But wait a minute, says the Gemara, V'hahava givini cruz. But why is that necessary? There was a Kohen in the Second Temple period whose name was Givini, and he was known as the Vecker. What, Alan? What is a Vecker? You know what a Vecker is?
The guy who wakes everyone up.
A Vecker. If anyone who's been in yeshiva knows what a Vecker is.
Yeah, a
Vecker as a waker. There would be a guy who'd go in yeshiva. He would say, Yisrael am kedoshim kumu la'avodas haboirei.
That's first call.
Right?
That's first call.
That was first call.
I guess it gets stronger afterwards.
In other words, but the point is that the Kohanim had that. The Kohanim had a person who would wake them up by announcing, the morning is coming, Kohanim arise, it's time to serve your Maker. There would be a chamber for Kohanim to sleep outside of the actual temple area, but adjacent to it, so that they could be ready to do the service immediately upon awakening, right? So the question, therefore, is why do you need the gear system if you have Givini, who's the veker? So the Gemara answers, Beitrei hekeiri havu avdi d'shama mehai asi v'shama mehai asi. The Gemara's answer is, and I can attest to this, there are two systems of waking up. Some people hear a person's voice and they wake up, and some people hear a harsh, clanging sound and they wake up. I know when my alarm clock goes off in the morning, my wife doesn't hear it, and only I hear it. But if someone is speaking, my wife hears it and I don't hear it. And so every person is conditioned to hear something different that wakes them up. And this is the same thing that's happening over here. Some Kohanim would respond more to arise from slumber from the clicking, and some would arise better from the veker.
It's like,
Okay,
who hears
Gufa.
the baby crying?
Yeah, that's right. Who hears the baby crying? It's exactly right. Gufa, Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, Kol Kior She'ein Bo Kedei Lakadesh Arba Kohanim Mimenu Ein Makadshim Bo. We're going to do the next piece of Gemara very quickly. The Gemara says in the name of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina that if you have a kior that's smaller than enough water to wash 4 Kohen's hands, it's not kosher as a kior. And how do I know this? It's the pasuk. Shenemar v'rochatzu mimenu Moshe v'Aaron uvanav. Because the Torah, in regard to the kior, says that Moshe, Aaron, and Aaron's 2 sons shall wash their hands from the kior. That's 4 people. So you need it to contain enough water to wash 4 people's hands. So Meisve, let's raise a contradiction. Kol hakela mikadshim bein sheyesh bahen revius, bein she'ein bahen revius, uvolvad sheyehu klei shares. This brisa says that any ministering vessel that's been sanctified through anointment is kosher to sanctify the Kohen's hands. It doesn't matter how big or small it is, as long as it's been sanctified as a kli sharis, as a ministering vessel. So you see from here, even if it doesn't even hold a revius, it could be used. So that clearly is less than enough to wash 4 Kohanim's hands. So how do you reconcile it? Amar Ravada bar Acha, b'kodeach b'socha. So the answer is that brisa is not talking about an independent small vessel. It's talking about where you take a small vessel and you attach it as an adjunct to the larger kior. So what you could do is you could let the water flow into the smaller vessel, and from the smaller vessel would have a spigot, and it would run onto the hands of the Kohen. That's what it's saying, is that if there's a small receptacle that the water runs into from the kior that's attached to the kior, that smaller receptacle can be smaller than even a revius. So, but if it's a standalone, then it wouldn't be kosher. V'ha mimenu amar rachmana. So wait a minute, but how can you use a smaller vessel as an adjunct to the kior? The Torah says you have to wash dafka mimenu, from the kior directly. So the Gemara answers, Yirchatzu l'rabos kli shares. The answer is because it also says an extra word, they shall wash, which tells me that I can even use an add-on to the kior as an adjunct. So the Gemara says, Ihachi kli chol nami. Well, then if you're using the word Yirchatzu to tell me that they can even use an adjunct, why does that adjunct have to be a special kli shares? Let it maybe just a piece of plastic made in China, just add it on to the kior. Where do you see that it has to be taka, a ministering vessel, anointed for the purpose of sanctification? Amar Abaye kli chol amatzis amart mikal v'chomer mikano umakano shenimshach imo eno makadesh kli chol she'eno nimshach imo eno din she'eno makadesh. We learn it out from a kal v'chomer, from the base of the kior. Now, if you remember the Torah in Parshas Kitisa, when it talks about the kior, it says v'yasisa kior nechoshes v'chano nechoshes l'rachza. You shall make a kior, a laver, and a laver base to support the weight of the kior, because the kior was round on the bottom, and it needed a base to support it, right? So that it wouldn't tilt. So this base has a bit of an indentation, which theoretically could contain water. And what we learn from this, what we know is that if you were to take the water, take water, put it into the base, and wash your hands from that, that's no good. So since I know that the base, which has been sanctified as a ministering vessel, cannot be used, then surely a totally non-sanctified vessel cannot be used. And the Gemara now says, V'chano minol, and how do you know that the base cannot be used? The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yochol yehikano mekadesh kederach shakir mekadesh, Tamul Omar v'yasisa kior nechoshes v'chano nechoshes. L'nechoshes hikashti v'lo l'davar acher. It's based on the pasuk in the Torah. The Torah says you shall make the kior out of copper and you shall make the base out of copper. So the Torah is only connecting the kior and its base for the material of copper, but it is not connecting it for any other purpose. So only the kior may be used to sanctify the hands of the kohanim and not the base. So Amarle Mar Zutra Bereder Rav Mari Ravina Malakanu Shein Asil L'Socho Tamar Bichli Chol Shasil L'Socho. But that's not a good kal v'chomer. Just because you cannot use the base to wash the Kohen's hands does not indicate that you cannot use a non-sanctified receptacle for that purpose, because maybe the reason why the base is not kosher is because it was never meant to be a receptacle vessel in the first place. It was never meant to hold water. It's only there to act as a base for the sink, for the laver. But maybe a receptacle vessel that is meant to hold water does not have to be sanctified in order to wash the Kohen's hands. So ela mimenu limeute klichol. So rather, let's modify our understanding of the verbiage in the pasuk. The word mimenu, they must wash from the kior itself, teaches me that they cannot use an adjunct to the kior that has not been sanctified. That's what the word mimenu is what teaches me that fact. Ihachi klishares nami. So if that's the case, that the word mimenu excludes any adjunct to the kior, why does it only exclude a non-sanctified adjunct? You should exclude all adjuncts, even sanctified adjuncts to the kior. So harabi rachmana yirchatzu. So that's what the word yirchatzu teaches me. That extra word, they shall wash, teaches me that as long as the adjunct is sanctified, it could be used to wash the Kohen's hands. Umarois, so why are you making that division between sanctified and non-sanctified? Zet ton mashicha kamohu v'zet ein ton mashicha kamohu. The answer is that an adjunct is acceptable to the kior. Why? Because it's an add-on to the kior and it's been anointed in the same way that the kior has been anointed. So they're similar enough to say that an adjunct vessel to the kior is like the kior itself and therefore it's acceptable. But a kli that, let's say, has never been anointed, was never sanctified, cannot fit as an adjunct to the kior to become just like the kior, and therefore it's not usable. Okay, we'll hold it here for today. A guten Erev Shabbos.